Happy Monday, folks. Today on the podcast, we have Susie Violet Ward, by far my favorite British Bitcoin journalist. So, look, I'm not going to steal her thunder. I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell you all about the world of Susie Violet Ward. Susie.
British journalist or global, I hope, because there aren't too many of us. I'm probably the only one in the UK, but thank you so much for saying that. So I'm Susie Violet Ward. I write about Bitcoin. I try and write factually correct stuff about Bitcoin, which I think is lacking in the mainstream media. I am also the co-founder with Ready New at Bitcoin Policy UK and the head of mining and energy.
Awesome. Wow. So, how long has it been since you've been a Bitcoiner? Well, are you a Bitcoiner or do you just write about Bitcoin?
That's a really interesting question, actually, because it's how do you know when it started? Because my
Mm,
husband, Rob, sent me messages back in 2017 where I had been saying, hey, look at this, look at this, look at this. And every single one he ignored me. And I'd been trying to send him messages and nothing. And then I
mm,
think it really, it was the pandemic, I think, that changed a lot of things for
mm.
people. And that's when we really started to take it seriously. But I think it was on our radar about 2017.
Right. Okay. Cool. So yeah, it's very similar to me actually. I mean, I knew about it, but I never fully got to grasps with it, right? Because it's such a rabbit hole. I mean, everyone says that,
Mm.
and then I didn't have to commute during COVID. I had so much work from home time, and I was like,
Yeah.
holy crap, this thing is unbelievably like dense, and it's this is far-reaching stuff. So I kind of just completely got hooked onto it, and then what I see in the mainstream media, though, is just the same old trope being repeated over. Like the next time I hear bloody tulip, whatever, like they just keep saying that. Why do they do that? Do they not get it? Do they don't? Maybe they're incentivized not to get it. What is it?
It could be all of the above. My previous, I started my, well, actually, I started off working in McDonald's, which I also think is super appropriate.
Yeah.
But
The plebs love McDonald's, so yeah.
But I started off as a secretary, and then I worked as an accounts assistant, and then I became an accountant, and then a financial analyst, and
Mhm.
then a Cognos developer for financial planning systems. So I had
Nice.
this whole 20 years of experience outside of Bitcoin, and every single one of those jobs felt like it was leading me to that point.
Mm.
Looked up, are you aware of BTC perception? That
No, what is that?
It's amazing. So they analyze all of the media articles for Bitcoin into neutral, positive, and negative
Right.
by news organization with the journalists that write about it.
Mm.
So you can see which news organizations are constantly putting out negative information, and that's
Mm.
like the Daily Mail, the BBC, the ones that you would expect. And
Mm.
then you can drill down and you can look at the people that write about it, and the
Mm.
journalists are just writers.
Mm.
They haven't had any. If you look, because I've looked at them on LinkedIn to try and
Mm.
see what kind of tech experience they've got or anything that might be relevant to this tool. And quite often they leave university and then just become journalists. And so,
Wow.
yeah, so I just don't know how you could possibly write about it without having some sort of background in finance or tech.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I mean, what I found with Bitcoin, and a lot of Bitcoiners will tell you this. I mean, when you spend about 100 hours just learning about Bitcoin, I very seldom, like, at no point have I met anyone who said, "Oh my God, this is a piece of shit." Nobody's ever said that,
So,
right? So it's kind of like you can dismiss it if you spend about 20 minutes reading about it, because oh my God, it's made up money and it's internet nerds, just whatever, burning up energy, as they keep saying. But yeah, it's really strange to me, and the voice, like the impact their voice has on the perception of Bitcoin. It's so sort of asymmetrical, isn't it? Like, I mean, these guys hold the reins to what people perceive about Bitcoin.
yeah.
You know?
And it's causing the people that read their articles harm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fair enough. Okay, so you discovered Bitcoin in 2020-ish, let's say, and then you got into it, and then where are you now with it? I mean, like, is it still a rabbit hole? Is it still a gift that keeps on giving, or are you like, this is passe, I know all about it?
No, how could anyone know all about it? I still feel like I know nothing about it. I feel like I could learn about it all day, every day, and still know nothing about it. It's so,
Mm,
and I don't
mm,
think I'll ever get fed up with learning about it either, because there are so many aspects. I love it when somebody is actually interested in what I do. 95% of the people around me kind of pretend like we don't talk about it
yeah.
because like I've even got family members that when they ask me, I'm like, "You really want to know?"
Yeah, it's like a dirty word, isn't it? It's kind of like a taboo. But especially with your finance background as well, right? So did you do that in uni, or what's your educational background?
Evening classes. So
Okay.
I was a school dropout basically at the age of
Oh
14,
wow, nice.
essentially.
Yeah,
And I
all the
did.
best ones are, Susie.
They are. I know. I've noticed that actually. I think it's because back in the 80s and 90s when we were at school, they didn't recognise all these kind of neurodiversities
Mm,
that people have in their brain, and I've clearly got minor ADHD. Um,
right.
and school didn't suit me at all. At all, it really, really
Mm,
didn't. And all of my learning started when I left school and I could make my own choices. I'm
mm,
not very good at being told what to do.
mm,
Probably
mm.
like most Bitcoiners, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's definitely something in common with all of us. Yeah.
Yeah. So I left and
Wow.
I went to work in McDonald's, like I
Yeah.
said at the beginning. But because I could make my own choices and I could decide what I wanted to do, I was then able
Mm,
to focus on what
mm,
I wanted to do. And so I went to evening classes to study accountancy. And what I found was when I could choose what I was studying, I
mm-hmm,
was fine.
mm.
If somebody told me what I had to put in my brain, not so.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And I think so. What was the style of teaching? I mean, did they focus more on what we call classical fiat economics, or was there any hint of things like Austrian economics, any of that stuff?
No, 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 no. You're learning about balance sheets and
Ah,
P&Ls
okay.
and how to do accounts and submissions and
Yeah,
things like that. There's
yeah.
there's no economics in it at all.
Time value of money kind of stuff. None of that. No.
No, 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 no.
Um.
Debits, credits, and how to
Yeah.
and
Okay.
bookkeeping.
So much more tactical, sort of, yeah, technical stuff, really, more than okay. That's interesting. So then obviously you must have sort of stumbled upon all these kind of concepts about, oh my God, my money, like inflation isn't necessarily good. Have you had those sort of brainstorming sessions with yourself?
All the time. Yeah.
Mm.
So because we're told that inflation is a necessary part of growth. Yeah, you think, well, it's
Yeah,
not growth, is it? And once the penny drops on that, everything you start questioning everything,
yeah,
and it really is an eye opener. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
yeah. And then do you bring these ideas up with friends and family? How does it go down?
God, if you turn around and say, "Do you know what? Taxation is theft," and the first thing they're going to be like, "No, you need ambulances and you need services," and I'm like, "Yeah, but they're not there, are they? Like
Mm,
none of these services." There would have been a time about kind of 3, 4 years ago, maybe prior to
hmm.
that I would have absolutely said, yeah, if you want an ambulance to come for you, then you should absolutely pay into the system. If you
Yeah.
want to be served when you go to A&E, then of course you've got to pay for that.
Mm,
But all of these services are diminishing and they're not even really there anymore. So it does make you wonder, what are we paying for?
yeah.
When I really think about what we're paying for,
Hmm.
we're paying for wars that
Hmm.
never end, and we're paying for debt interest. They're the
Mm,
large parts. So we're paying for fiscal mismanagement
hmm.
and government sanctioned murder.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I
Mm.
would argue that not only is taxation theft, but I'd also say that in today's current setup, it's immoral.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this goes around to the whole status argument about, yeah, but if you don't pay taxes, there won't be roads, right? Almost as if the government is actually out there building roads. But the reality is the government is the middleman getting the contractor to build the roads. So in other words, all they are is adding unnecessary friction and margin to
Yeah.
the free market,
Mhm.
right? So, and where there's a need, there will always be, I mean, where there's demand, there would be supply. I mean, if we're looking for a road to be built outside your house and the government isn't interested in doing it, you will find a private contractor who will say, yeah, okay, that's a good job. I can do it for you. You know, so it kind of, yeah. And when it comes to the endless money printing, the finance wars that never end, I mean, it's like I mean, if you have access to a button that can print you as much money and make your assets a lot more expensive, like I don't, I think the most rational response to that would be to do what they're doing. It's just human incentive, right? I mean, how are you going to break that mold? And how are these guys who are so entrenched in the system talking about changing the very system that keeps them in the first place?
Doesn't make sense because of the short termism as well.
Mm,
So they're always looking at things. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of how China's run, but at
right.
least they have that long termism where they can see 20, 30 years down and plan accordingly. Everything we do is just in the short term. It's just to
Yeah.
get over the next hurdle. There's no long term planning.
Yeah, it's the election cycle as well, really, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of like every 5 years you're gonna have to reinvent yourself and just stay popular, or else lose your job, you know?
Yep.
Which again, like I mean, for me, that brings the whole democracy thing into question. And I'm like, oh my God, is that even yeah. Yeah, yeah, good point.
I mean, when you think about how the mainstream media kind of manipulate people, tell them what to think, don't give them correct information,
Hmm.
we're kind of coerced into believing certain narratives and we vote accordingly. I
Psyops.
live in the
Yeah.
illusion of a democracy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a psychological warfare, really, and it happens at such a sort of gradual level. It's not in your face all the time. And it's kind of like being slowly strangled to death over a century, right? Do you know what I mean? Like
It's the
it doesn't happen overnight.
boiling frog analogy. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, yeah. So so is Bitcoin the only escape then, do you think? Is that the way out of the matrix?
It's definitely going to help, isn't it? Because if we can, I don't think that we can fix anything until we fix money.
Mm,
And once you've fixed the money, then you can start to fix everything else. I
mm,
don't think it will fix everything, but I think it will be a really good start. And if we can make governments smaller,
mm,
that's got to be a good thing.
mm. So am I right in saying then it's not purely for you, you're not looking as Bitcoin as, hey, this is the best performing asset in the last 15 years. But and for me, it's not only that. For me, it's like this is the best single issue voting thing that I would probably go for, right? I'm not a big fan of voting to begin with because, like I said, it's just psyops, right?
Mm.
But is this a freedom of expression thing as opposed to like, oh my God, I'm going to make a shit ton of fake money, you know?
Number go up is the least exciting part. I write about it from time to time because I think that it's what people want to read.
Mm,
I'm not interested in number go up, really.
yeah, yeah. So you want to break money,
Yeah,
you want
well,
to break.
human rights aspect. You've got
Mm,
the freedom aspect. You've got fixing the money, fix the world. There are so many parts to it that actually help humanity. And I can't remember the name of the guy who said it, but he said, for us to see a good money again, we'll have to take it out of the hands of governments in a peaceful.
yeah, was it Hayek? I think it was Hayek who said that. And to introduce it, yeah, to introduce it in a surreptitious way that the government can't even bloody do anything about it.
Yes,
Uh,
exactly.
um, I think that's such a like it's unbelievable that Satoshi or whoever he or she or they are have essentially started a revolution without firing a single bullet, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
colossal the scale of this thing. So all right, just bringing it back to a little bit more. I mean, our boring UK politics. I'm not a big fan of it, but look, we're gonna have to talk. We're gonna have to talk about this, right? So, what are the government actually thinking about this? Are we just a bunch of right-wing nutters who don't give a shit about money and they like Bitcoin's not really a real thing? Is there anything happening about taking this seriously? What's your take on it? I know you're not. It's not necessarily you're not going to speak officially on the government's position. I'm just interested in your opinion.
Well, I'm a lefty, and
Hmm.
I don't actually like the way that it's being co-opted as a right-wing movement because it is apolitical. There's
Hmm.
no way it can be a left-right issue at all. When I say I'm a lefty, I'm not really. I actually think that's a really silly
Yeah,
that we put people on. If you were to pinpoint where I was, I would be a lefty libertarian.
yeah,
So I'm really uncomfortable with the left-right narrative overall. In fact, I think we should just scrap it completely.
Yeah.
But governments are they don't take it seriously, I don't think. I mean, some people think that they do, and it's really hard to know where the incompetence starts and ends, and where the knowledge and the power begins,
Mm.
because they must know something. And there's part of me that is thinking that game theory is playing out behind closed doors. So
Right.
even though when you speak to, say, people on an individual level, and it was really, we did a lot of work with MPs and found the MPs that were interested, and then we had an election, and then it all changes again, and then you've got to start all over again. So for example, Steve Baker was the closest thing that we had to an MP in
Mm.
Parliament. No, he's no longer an MP, which is a shame.
Right.
So it's really hard to keep educating people. And there is part of me, this is why it's so good that Freddie does this, because if it was up to me, I'd be like, look, they need to come to us. They need us. We don't need them. Bitcoin
Yeah.
will do its thing. They need to get on board. We shouldn't have to keep convincing them it's the right thing to do.
Mm.
But
Mm.
good thing I'm not head of policy, because that would be my mantra.
Yeah, and exactly, and I think something for Freddie, and we're definitely going to talk about this, is things like having think tanks and stuff like this, and also just looking at some of the other governments around the world who are actually, well, openly claiming to have, let's say, some Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and it's not being purely viewed as evil necessarily by all governments, which is part of the game theory of it, right? I mean, if I, as a single issue voter, now I love London, I love living here, I love the whole thing, right? But at the same time, if my primary source of wealth was my Bitcoin, and if the government wants to tax me or doesn't take it too seriously or just gives me hell about it, I just pack up and move. you
Well,
know?
they want to introduce an exit tax. Isn't that what they've actually started talking
Yeah,
about? But in the
yeah.
very same week that the US, so this was in January 2024, when
Hmm.
they launched a Bitcoin spot ETF, so when all the institutions were coming on board in the US,
Hmm.
that was the same week that we made it really difficult and shut or made it hard with the on off ramps to buy Bitcoin with the FCA. So the
Yeah.
FCA are there to protect investors.
Mm.
They just shut them down just before a bull run.
Yeah, but is that because I don't know, HSBC knows that Bitcoin's going to have it for lunch, and they just don't want to. I mean, it's competition, isn't it?
Is it? There's only competition if you take it seriously. Do they take it seriously?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you should watch what they say. I think we should watch what they do. To be
What are they
honest, I
doing
think.
though? There's nothing. The good thing is they haven't sold the 61,000 that they confiscated. It'd be really that the UK
Yeah,
is the
yeah,
third largest holder, I believe.
that's correct. Yeah, Bhutan's fourth, right? Strangely, out of
Yeah,
nowhere.
yeah. They've got
The
like
Chinese and the Americans.
0.75 Bitcoin for every resident in their
Yeah,
country.
yeah, yeah. Wait, did you know like about this whole? They don't have a GDP necessarily. They measure the global happiness thing. Did you know that?
No, I love that.
Yeah, yeah. So they don't measure gross domestic product. They literally have a happiness index, and that's what they try and optimize for, right? Which would make complete sense because there are a bunch of monks in the Himalayas buying Bitcoin. I mean, it kind of makes perfect sense to me.
That's it's so beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. It's really inspiring, and that's what I was hoping. Maybe somebody out there, the somebody who can look past their ego, who is in power in government, who can enforce some of this stuff, at least starts having a healthy, open debate about it instead of just quashing, like just sort of relegating it to nothing.
But they've got to
Um,
understand it first. So they've got to see the value enough for them to sit down and actually do the work to understand it.
mm, mm, and again, I mean, they're not incentivized to learn about it.
No.
Yeah. So maybe number go up is the best way of getting their attention.
Well, it will be, because when it hits a certain price, I don't know what that price will be, they will have to start paying attention to it. And it is the best, like you said, it's the best performing asset of the past decade. And
Yeah,
when the ETFs started happening, it created its own new asset class as well. I
it
mean,
did. Yeah.
it's a complete it's going for it. And if they're not paying attention, then we really need to ask ourselves if our government are either incompetent or lying to us.
Mm. or both.
One of the two. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I know it's right.
yeah. So
But
the
that's why it's really hard to figure it out because, like, it's literally both. I think the stupidity is useful to the people that know what's going on.
true. Yeah, yeah. No, exactly. I mean, that's your opportunity, right? That's like your margin cost. I mean, yeah, you want people to, you want to be able to buy stuff that nobody in the world understands and hold it forever while they gain the understanding of it, which is great for Bitcoin because it's working out exactly like that. But if you really want to not just use Bitcoin purely for the number go up tech and rather for, like you said, for human rights, for just a better quality of life, then you'd need the likes of the government to actually understand that. And I think that's a very hard sale for them to do.
I mean, one school of thought is who cares what the government do? This is
Mm.
not supposed to be co-opted by governments.
Yeah, no, agreed, agreed. And that's why I'm a bit skeptical about the ETFs, right? I have reservations about it because I think that is probably the first global fiat product backed by Bitcoin. That's what I think it really is.
It's not ideal, and I don't want Bitcoin to be held by institutions. I want it to be doing the job it's designed to do, which is a peer-to-peer global cash outside of governmental stroke institutional control. But it should be able to survive that, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't deserve to exist.
Yeah, no, I think it will survive it. It's just that it's going to be sort of prone to manipulation, and to some extent. But the bigger problem is people are going to start buying proxies of Bitcoin thinking they own the real thing, right? When they actually don't. And it's kind of like owning a shitload of paper money when you had the gold bullion, right? That's the atmosphere it sort of creates. Net positive for Bitcoin, like this whole theory about everything is good for Bitcoin, and I think there is some truth to that. But and like the UK has, I believe there was an ETF on the London Stock Exchange, correct? Is that do you know if that's active or do you know anything about it?
I don't. I'm not aware that we can buy any kind of Bitcoin ETF in the UK at the moment.
Okay, so what are the on ramps? Just Strike. I know Strike launched in the UK recently. Coinbase, I guess. I mean, that's it. Those are the only avenues.
Yeah, probably crypto.com, maybe Gemini. But
Yeah.
I think that they introduced a rule where you couldn't buy Bitcoin. You had to fill out a form. This was early January. You had to fill out a form, and if you couldn't buy Bitcoin if it was more than 10% of your net wealth or something.
Yeah, yeah. So I recently signed up to an app just to see the how it works, right? And because yeah, they make you do this like a ridiculous self-assessment form thing where you're like, oh, I'm not going to put in more than 10% of my net worth into Bitcoin. I understand Bitcoin is a highly volatile asset. I understand that if Bitcoin goes to zero, all my money is gone. And I understand it trades over the weekend. And it's like, okay, I gotta take. And then I get the account. Then they lock you in for 24 hours. They freeze you out for 24 hours, right? It's like a countdown thing. And only then you can start, right?
Mm.
And to make it worse, my bank has a limit on how much money I can put in to Bitcoin, to a specific crypto exchange. And if I cross a certain limit, they just cancel my transactions. Like, and this is, I can't believe this. Like, this is 2024 in London, and I don't have access to buy whatever the hell I want with my own post-tax money. Like,
Yeah, your money, and they're telling you what you can do with it.
yeah,
But you could go down and put it all on red,
yeah, of course, yeah, you could, yeah, you could,
and that's fine.
yeah, yeah. So that's why CBDCs, isn't it? Like, this is why. Go
So
on, regale us with your CBDC stories or opinions.
it's terrifying.
Mm,
Programmable money is just closing the loop on what George Orwell wrote about in his book 1984.
mm,
He didn't see CBDC. He predicted the telly box
yeah, it
and
did.
everything
Yeah,
listening to you,
yeah.
but programmable money.
Mm,
Wow. And when you speak to because I've been going to CBDC events up in London
Oh
for
wow, okay.
like 2 years and taking notes on everything that they're doing and then typing up the notes just so I've got a record because it's not, because the only people that go to these events are people in TradFi.
Mm,
So I want to know what's going on and I want to know what they're saying and I want to know what they're telling people. So I've been writing everything down, typing up all of my notes, and I've just come to the conclusion that these people just don't know what they're doing. So at first I was terrified at the
mm,
concept, and I still am worried about, what they need, what they want them to do,
mm,
but can they pull it off? They're failing in all these other countries that they've been implemented in. They're not doing particularly well in China, and you just thought that they would have really taken off. And
mm,
Nigeria has been a fail.
mm.
And when you listen to them talking about what they want to actually implement, and then you speak to the people that are trying to implement it, you realize they don't actually know as much as they claim to know. And no one who actually knows what they're talking about would work on a project like this.
Right. So what are some of those aims that that they openly talk about at least?
Well, they want to completely change how money works.
Right.
So if you've got programmable money as a like a central bank programmable money, one, it's a honeypot for hackers. No one can tell anybody if it's going to be on a blockchain or if it's just going to be on a central database.
Mm-hmm.
They want to put out a pilot, I think, by mid 2025, but the design hasn't even been built according to the Digital Pound Foundation. Well, how how can you rewrite how money works and have something to test by mid
Mm.
2025 if you haven't even designed it?
Yeah. Yeah. And is this happening in collaboration with other governments? Is this like a global thing, do you think? Are they doing it for the
It's
European
definitely
level?
global. It's definitely global, and there are definitely companies that are buying influence. So
Mm,
you'll see that Ripple are always the ones that are on any kind of digital pound website, whether it be a
mm.
digital dollar or a digital whatever.
Yeah.
People will always be involved, and they'll always
Yeah.
be sponsoring it, and they'll be all over the documentation that gets sent out.
Right, yeah, because I think there's a subtlety to this, right? I mean, it's not so every pound, I mean, almost all pounds that we have today are digital anyway, right? They're in the balance sheet, but the difference is they're not programmable, and I think the programmability makes it from pure fiat to sinister fiat. I mean, literally sinister fiat in the wrong hands,
Mhm.
because like if they don't like a tweet I put out 7 years ago, they might stop me from buying a flat white. I mean, that's the reality of it. Um, you know, how do you break that if that is the form of money? I mean, yes, Bitcoin as a parallel economy, fair enough. But doing things like taxes, doing things like targeted advertising that's delivered, like I mean, this is rife for exploitation, and we are simply sort of just busy with bloody Netflix and just
Yeah,
watching this happen.
yeah, or being convinced that it's a conspiracy theory. That's another thing because
Yeah.
they always seem to use that term as a way to basically anything that's not within the mainstream narrative, which we know is manipulated, is considered a conspiracy theory. So when I watched a BBC documentary. Just I felt I had to. I didn't want to. It was
Mm,
it was half an hour, and I was like, oh, I've really got to know what they're telling people about this. And they put people that didn't like CBDCs in the same bucket as uh, anti-Semitic. They were just bundling it up with
yeah.
everything that they try and convince people is bad, and then went, look, they're like them.
Mm, mm. It's just industrial scale carpet bombing of gaslighting, right? It's just incredible that this like we're fed this nonsense. I mean, I'm watching mainstream media. Like I can't remember. I haven't bought
I
a
have
newspaper
to.
in ages.
I have to. I want to know what they're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, you're kind of like, you're watching Big Brother, if you know what I mean. Like, and,
Mm.
and we need that first line of defense because, I mean, how else do we know what the other side's up to? But Jesus Christ. I mean, I don't pity you at all for that. I mean, I don't envy you. I mean, I can't. I can't bear, like, we just had a child, right? I mean, he's only 5 weeks old, and I am already thinking,
So you
Jesus. Say it again?
are you getting any sleep?
Well, yes and no. I mean, to be honest, the wife is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, right? I mean, she's been great. But yeah, in fits and starts, we have been sleeping. I mean, he's old enough now, and his sort of his feeding and sleep schedule is a little bit more solid, right?
Five
So
weeks.
5 weeks,
Oh,
yeah,
that
five.
won't
And I
last.
mean, he's premature as well, just to make it.
That's not gonna. That is not gonna last. Like
I know.
at least a year of up and down. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. Look, it's been fun, but I mean, to be honest, I grew up watching like CBeebies and Tweenies or whatever the hell was running on telly at the time, and I'm thinking for my son, I mean, why did they start bloody introducing, I don't know, psyops into the kids shows? Like,
mm,
because it's a fertile mind, it's fertile ground, and just bombard them with nonsense.
yeah.
Um, and you just like you get them young essentially, right? And it's like
Isn't that what
I'm
school is?
terrified of it.
School is just government indoctrination, isn't it?
Mm, mm. Oh yeah, well there you go. That's a big geez, that's a podcast in itself. The schooling thing. So go on, give us your 20-second take on that. What let's double click into school as government indoctrination.
Look, without going into specifics, I
Yeah,
speak to my kids when they come back, and
yeah.
I know that a lot of what they're being taught is just very behind. Because by the time it gets itself into the curriculum, everything's changed. So, for
Mm,
example, when it comes to renewables and green incentives and all these things that they tell people are good. So my daughter came back and was telling me how nuclear was bad and solar was good. And I
mm,
was like, oh man. So I made
yeah.
a TED talk that just undid everything that her teacher has said. And I said,
Mm,
that TED talk was done 5 years ago.
mm,
And
mm.
that was way ahead of what your teacher is teaching you today. But the
Yep.
brilliant thing about it is it does give you an opportunity for them to see the world
Mm,
and understand that what they're told from authoritative figures
mm,
isn't necessarily true. Because I
mm,
grew up thinking, well, if a teacher's told me that or an adult's told me that, then it has to be true.
mm,
But I want
mm.
them to go into the world and really question absolutely everything that they're told and try and work it out for themselves.
Yeah, I think skepticism is something that has to be sort of inculcated, right? It used to come as default, I think, for a certain batch of kids, especially me. I mean, we were rebellious. We would go, no, like definitely not. But now it's kind of like that's almost you become a pariah if you did that.
Yeah,
You better conform.
yeah. And if you don't conform to whatever is on TikTok,
Mm,
then you have real social issues
yeah,
in your peers.
yeah,
My kids aren't allowed on that kind of social media, and that causes problems in itself.
yeah,
But
yeah. How old are they? How old are your kids?
11 and 14.
Oh, nice. Okay, right. Okay.
So
Yeah. So it's a
they know
critical age.
they're
Yeah.
controlling everything that they think through these platforms because they're just constantly scrolling. So if
Yeah.
you want to control people's minds, you just go on TikTok and Instagram and you've got them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And yeah, see, and it's that TikTok. The thing is, the victims of this are actually the fodder that keeps the system running. You see,
Mm.
it's an unbelievably good business plan. I mean, it's like the raw material and the end customer are the same bloody thing. you know. So from an industrial point of view, it's this machine is just going to keep churning because it's going to feed on itself.
Yeah, and how do you know what you're thinking is real? How do you even know to question it if everybody around you is believing the same thing?
Mm, mm. And with some of the laws, like they could potentially arrest you for putting out a tweet or even liking a tweet that they don't like. I mean, that's some of the stuff that's come out recently. It's these kind of things that really kind of freak me out because like I'm Irish, right? And we have a pretty laissez-faire attitude towards most
Hang on,
the.
isn't
Mhm.
there a law that came out in Ireland about hate speech?
They did, and then they repealed it, right? So it's
Right.
not it's not law anymore. It was for about a couple of weeks. But at least that happened, right? At least there was a discussion on it. But I think in the UK, it's slightly more. I don't know. It just feels because I lived in Dublin for pretty much all my life, and I moved to London a couple of years back. It just feels a lot more rule heavy. I don't know.
London. I'm just
Yeah,
reading a post
sure.
about it was something that I posted about this. It's just really relevant to what you said. And right, here it is. The EU is enforcing their Digital Services Act, which can target undesirable content even if it's legal.
Wow.
So so there's going to be somebody who is that came out a month ago.
Yeah.
So there's going to be somebody deciding if what you've posted is undesirable or not,
Even if it's legal.
even if it's legal.
Right. Oh, there we go. Hopefully this bloody Bitcoin thing better work.
Yeah, everyone has to go to Nosta. Go to Nosta. Are you on Nosta?
I am, yes, I am. I'm quite new to it. I must say I have to break my Twitter addiction. I'm so used to the bloody thing, and it's the only social media I have, right? So I like to think I'm on a social media diet, but actually I think Nostr is where I should be spending more time on.
The way I like thinking about Nosta is that we all need to be using it to make it better. There's
Mm.
no point in having a social media app that or protocol that nobody uses. So
Yeah,
I think of it as just being a tester.
yeah. No, fair enough. I think no, definitely. I have it on my phone, but it's kind of lying dormant. I set it up and then I've just forgotten about it. It's the draw of the fiat world. It's alluring this thing. It's playing on you constantly, and I'm like, yeah, I need to break free from this. But yeah, no, I'll take your advice up on that for sure. Switching gears slightly, Susie. More on your. I suppose this is more up your alley, as it were. Tell me about Bitcoin mining. Tell me about the energy companies. What's happening in the UK?
Not much because energy is so expensive, but we are working on initiatives where businesses can try and revive sites that would otherwise be mothballed just by introducing Bitcoin mining. I can't
Mm.
talk too much about it because
Mm-hmm.
there's lots of ideas that we're playing with, but there are companies out there that have a lot of stranded energy. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, you've got a business that has solar panels and you use your energy during the day, but you can't connect back to the grid. Then, outside of those business hours and at the weekend, you're
Mm-hmm.
producing electricity that isn't being used.
Mm-hmm.
And they must be all over the UK. So,
Mm-hmm.
you can find those businesses that have basically got excess solar or
Yeah.
and the curtailment. I mean, I think last year in the UK, the National Grid paid something crazy like 215 million just to switch off so it
Mm.
didn't overload the grid. And we know that
Right.
Bitcoin mining, because of the model that they have in
Yeah.
Texas, we know that it can just be switched over. It can be used for demand response. It's
Yeah.
an absolute no-brainer if we're going to go down the renewables and we've got excess wind and solar and we can't overload the grid. It's,
Mm-hmm.
it's a no-brainer. So we put out a paper
Mm-hmm.
that explains how Bitcoin mining can help and how it can save them money because these costs get passed on to the
Mm.
consumers.
Mm. Absolutely. And I think Alex Gladstein's done a lot of work on this arena. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yes, yeah, I know,
You
Alex.
are, yeah. Okay, brilliant. Yeah, because he's like, I mean, for me, he's like the energy OG on anything to do with Bitcoin. Because I think he's the way he explains it. I heard his talk in Nashville 20 Bitcoin conference 2024 as well.
Yeah, I was there
I
too.
wasn't there. Sorry, I just kind of
Oh,
I just
okay.
looked at the video. I wish I was there, but yeah, maybe the next one. Um. So yeah, no, that's interesting. And did you read about this Norway stuff? Remember, Norway turned off their Bitcoin or their mining. So sorry, customers got a 30% increase in their electricity bills after Norway stopped Bitcoin mining from the grid, right?
Oh,
So straight away, it just cost them more.
of
And
course.
like you said, it just gets passed on to the customer. So, and if the energy's there anyway, why not just use it?
Yeah. So I've been trying to contact. So whenever there's a green initiative or
Mm,
they put something out that said we're interested in ideas, come up. We've got this beautiful document that we can send to people that explains exactly how Bitcoin mining works and why demand response, why it's needed for flexible loads. I've sent it to the Future Energy Scenario Department at the National Grid, and I keep chasing them and prodding them and saying, have you read the document? Come on. I send it to anybody who I think is looking into these solutions. The fact that we pay hundreds of £1 million to curtail this energy is
Yeah.
madness.
It is. It is. It's yeah, yeah, and it's not even. Well, hopefully you don't piss off the climate change guys because they still have the assumption that Bitcoin uses as much energy as Sweden and it needs to be turned off. You're like, it
Well,
doesn't.
it comes down to the 100 hours. It depends what you put value on, doesn't it? So if
Mm,
you put value on tumble dryers, then that's what you want to put. If you put value on a sound global peer-to-peer cash that can't be interfered with by, you know,
yeah,
authoritarian governments, and it really does. And the fact that we need to have energy connected back to the real world, that's why we're in this mess. So
yeah,
if people understood that money has to be connected to the real world and it has to be connected to energy, it's always been connected to energy. I mean, when it was gold, well, if you want to make an ounce of gold, you have to
expend energy. Yeah,
into 80 tons of rock to create something really small. And then you know that that energy is there. And when you trade it, you know that you're essentially trading that energy.
monetary energy. Exactly. Yeah,
So
yeah, and I think
learning, and it's what you put value on, I think.
yeah, and I think that's like, and that's Satoshi's genius for me, right? I mean, it took me so long to get that point, to get a very simple message that your real world energy can be cryptographically moved to cyberspace, right? Without, with minimal loss, and it'll stay there, and you can move that through space and through time, and it still remains there. Like that is like astounding to me.
Genius. It's genius, but it takes a long time to understand, and people won't put the time in because they've been convinced that it's a Ponzi scheme, that it's boiling the oceans, that
Yeah,
it's used for criminals. All of
yeah.
these narratives that just aren't true, but they're fused into people's brains, and it's like a blocker stopping them from seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, and but do you think that is an impasse? As in, on the one hand, you have Bitcoiners who see the world through the laser eyes, right? They see through the bullshit, let's say. And assuming we're right, okay, because we could all be under some sort of mass delusion here, right? I mean, I'm still
I
saying
do
it could be.
question that regularly.
Yeah.
Am I mad? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So let's assume that we're not delusional, at least, right? To about, I don't know, 99% probability. Um, is it just Bitcoiners buying Bitcoin? That is because that's always been my big worry with this thing. I think we're simply preaching to the choir, but we're not actually reaching across the aisle and getting those guys to believe it, because that's what you really need for global adoption. That's what you need to break the matrix. But if it's just you and I talking about the stuff that we already know
Hmm.
and sort of just reinforcing the message to each other, is that actually doing a net positive for Bitcoin?
Okay, so a couple of things. It is only a 15-year-old asset and it can't
Mm,
grow really quickly. So
mm,
I'm happy with it being slower. I would actually argue that its growth is too fast.
mm.
And if we're holding the Bitcoin, I haven't got any because I can't afford it because I'm just a poorly paid writer. But say Bitcoiners are holding the Bitcoin,
Yeah.
then they're stopping institutions from getting it.
Hmm.
So, the old kind of meme, don't sell your Bitcoin to BlackRock.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy with having long-term holders holding Bitcoin and it not making its way into the institutions.
Mm,
Because
mm,
as it evolves, and the growth has to be slow. I mean, if 8 billion people suddenly came on, it wouldn't work.
mm.
There are lots of
Agreed.
there are lots of problems that we've got to solve. We can't keep being hyperbolic and talking about how amazing and how it's going to fix everything, because there are things that we have to consider. There are
Yeah.
issues, there are
Yeah.
problems, scalability
Absolutely.
issues, for example.
Mm, mm.
So
Yeah.
I'm
Scaling.
not worried at this point. I think it has to be slow, and I'm not worried that there's lots of people holding it,
Okay.
not
Okay. No,
box hoppers.
your point taken. Absolutely. And I wasn't, I guess, um, See, the thing with Bitcoin though is like, and again, it kind of links to the mining as well, right? So you know the way you got to do the whole proof of work and consensus mechanism and so on, right? Only then you get the right for about 10 minutes to write something in the ledger, which is sort of the gospel, like literally the gospel, right? That's the mining process. But I think when it comes to even talking about Bitcoin in an educated way, you've got to put in the proof of work of hours and hours of critical thinking, of self-doubt, of studying, of just listening to all this crap or not crap, and then putting all of this together just to have the right to actually say to somebody, hey guys, this is actually what it is, right? There is some sort of self-mining thing to even understand the bloody thing.
Yeah. And I love the term proof of work as well, because you can apply it to everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely everything is proof of work.
Mm.
Once
Yeah.
you understand proof of work, you think, yeah, you've got to put in the effort, whether that be in your work or your podcasts or
Yeah.
in down the gym.
Yeah.
Everything is proof of work.
Yeah, except for the money printer, but you know, and that therein lies the problem.
Yes. And that's why we are where we are. And that
Yeah.
because there is no proof of work. But once that penny drops, so many other things fall into place.
So the hard money society, I guess. So I take it you were an advocate of gold back in the day, or what's your take on something like gold as hard money?
I honestly didn't think about it, and I didn't really think about stocks or shares. I had a work-based pension where I just trusted my employer to just do some stuff with it. Like I ticked a box and it went into a fund, and I had no clue what it was doing. I think it was only really when I started learning about Bitcoin that I started to understand that you could choose things. So with my when I was employed, I actually made the decision after learning about Bitcoin to take it out of my workplace pension and put it into a SIP where I
Right.
could control what happens. And since then, it's doubled.
Wow.
And
Mm.
that's only been in the past couple of years, and that's through me understanding and making choices. I mean, it wasn't massive to start with, and it's definitely not going to sort out my retirement, but it
Mm.
was something that was small that I now have control over, that I'm
Mm.
helping to make grow,
Mm.
which they didn't.
Mm. Yeah, and even if they didn't, they still get paid their fees anyway, right?
Well,
So
yeah,
so
if
that's
it
the
goes up or down, they could screw it up, and you could lose everything, and they'll still get their 1%.
yeah, they will. It's just try and this is yeah, and it's I mean it would be really funny if it wasn't so bloody tragic.
I
This
know.
thing.
But isn't that applied to absolutely everything? Like you saw my post this morning, didn't you?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. I mean, I think the only thing that has kept me going on this journey, which we can talk about now or wait to talk about, but it's just talking about how tragic it
Mm.
is the absurdity of it all.
Yeah. So let's give the listeners the 30,000 foot view of where you are with this saga.
So it started. I think it was the end of November, and the BBC published an article that every Bitcoin payment uses a swimming pool's worth of water.
Mm.
So I thought, right, okay, the source of this is Alex de Vries. Alex de Vries is a Dutch central banker, and he is notorious in the space for the misinformation that he puts out. And he was
Mm-hmm.
debunked in 2018. So he's not a credible source.
Mm.
So I wanted to know what kind of fact checking the BBC had done on this, because they obviously trusted their source and
Mm-hmm.
just blindly accepted what he had said
Mm.
and then published his information.
Mm.
So I thought, right, okay, well, I'll go and see if I can get a freedom of information request to find out what kind of fact checking they did on this particular article.
Mm-hmm.
They denied my request, and the reason they denied it is because the BBC, under the Freedom of Information Act, journalism is protected.
Right.
So they don't have to tell me anything about anything that they write.
Mm.
So I thought, well, that
Okay.
can't be right because this is in the public interest. Because when you looked at when they published that article, you could see within the same hour,
Mm.
about 12 different publications had published exactly the same. So that is how misinformation spreads. So the
Exactly.
organisation that talks about misinformation
Mm.
is one of the worst perpetrators.
Mm.
It was when I saw how all these news articles like pinging up with the same nonsense. I thought, this isn't right. This isn't right. So that's when I started getting a little bit of a bee in my bonnet about it. And then when they denied my freedom of information request, I was like, hang on a second. So I know this is wrong.
Mm.
And you won't even tell me how you fact checked it.
Mm.
So then I went to the Information Commissioner's office to try and see if I could get that freedom of information denial overturned.
Mm.
That was a palaver. They upheld the request.
Mm.
They upheld the BBC's decision to deny it.
Right.
And I was just really shocked. And I said, well, where do I go? And I was talking to the lady. I said, I've emailed the journalist. He's ignoring me. I've emailed the crypto correspondent. He's confirmed that he has nothing to do with it, but he's forwarded it on to the journalist who wrote the piece, who is ignoring me.
Mm.
The office are ignoring me. So in between all of this, I was emailing all of these people as well to just try and get some information.
Mm.
So I spoke to the lady at the ICO and I said, look, these guys are denying me. You're upholding it because legally you have to. The press office are not talking to me. The journalists are not talking to me. I submit it on a web form that I've found and it just goes into cyberspace and nothing happens. Like, where do I take this? I know it's wrong. Where do I go? And even she had a penny drop moment on the phone when I was talking to her. And she was like, God, yeah, you're right. She's like, yeah, what do you do?
Mm.
I was like, this is unbelievable. And then I really started to think, this can't be right. This can't be the end of the road. This was 6 months in.
Wow.
I've got nowhere to go with this. Like, literally every avenue seems to be a blockage.
Mm.
So then I try again and I write to the crypto correspondent, the journalist who wrote the piece, and the press office.
Mm.
Say, guys, I'm still here, right? This is the information that's wrong. How did you fact check it? I can prove that it's wrong. What are you going to do about it? And then somebody came back and said, right, use this web form, submit a complaint to editorial complaints. So I was like,
Right.
okay, all right, great. So I went on the web form and it said that you have to put your address in. At the time, I thought, I'm not giving you my details. I don't trust you.
Yeah.
Like, people said to me after, you could have put a fake address in, but it didn't occur to me at the time. I was just so like, I'm not giving you my
It's
information.
so wound up. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I phoned up and did it over the phone, which is a really difficult thing to do. It's not only time consuming, but you've got to relay the information verbally to someone who's then typing it down and then telling you back what you've said. And this is a complicated subject. Anyway, I got my case reference.
Right.
Get back to me within 10 working days.
Mm.
Oh, wow. After 6 months, I'm going to get a response after 10 working days. Like, bonus. This could be
Resolved.
So then I get an email, sorry, it's taking longer than we expected. And I was like, okay. And then I get another email like about 4 weeks after saying, sorry, still taking us a little bit of time, but you can go to Ofcom because we're aware that we're taking longer than we should. So I'm like, okay, so that's another job. Every time they make a suggestion, it's like work for me.
It's just more work, yeah. It's just busy work, really. I mean, yeah.
And it's a pain. It's depressing kind of admin.
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
But I was just like, I'll do it. Like, if they've given me an avenue to try, I will try that avenue just to prove that it isn't workable. So I go to Ofcom, I fill out the form, I do all of that stuff, and then they send me a message saying, thank you, we've got it. We don't generally get back to people, but rest assured that we've got your information. It's like, great. So it's literally just gone there to die.
Yeah.
It's another dead end.
So what would it be, like 10 months down now? 11 months?
That was around about 10 months, yeah. So then I get, but in this time, I'm still phoning them up and giving pokes and saying, can you give me an update on this? And they never had anything to tell me. And then the last time I chased them, they said, look, we'll get something to you. And then that's when I got the email from them where they'd gone back to De Vries, the discredited source,
right,
to verify his discredited information.
Okay.
So they'd ignored the evidence that I'd provided. I provided this evidence because they can't accept email. So
Mm.
I either did it on a web form which has 2,000 characters, which I
Mm.
can't, or I do it over the phone, which I can't,
Mm.
or I email it
Mm.
to the journalist,
Mm.
who I would have thought they would have gone back to speak
The source.
about
Yeah.
this piece. So that for me, that was the best solution. Right. So I emailed my evidence to the journalist,
Mm.
and then they just came back and said, right, we've gone back to De Vries and he said X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, you didn't check anything I sent you. Like
Yeah.
nothing. You didn't look at anything. So then that's when the Digital Asset Research Institute reached out to me and they
Mm-hmm.
said, look, we've got loads of stuff. Let us help you write a rebuttal to this ridiculous response,
Mm-hmm.
which I did. But then I thought, well, how am I going to get them that response? It was like 15 pages. And they took the letter that the BBC had sent me,
Mm.
every single paragraph, and
Mm.
debunked every single
Oh
sentence.
wow,
It was beautiful.
that is a work of art,
Yeah,
right?
it was amazing. It was amazing. And then with my additional information, so what I did was I sent them a message and I said, look, this case is, you might think this case is closed, but it's not. You ignored my evidence. Here it is in a Google Doc. And then a few days later, the Digital Assets Research Institute sent their rebuttal through. And then I sent another one on the web form
Mm.
and said, and weirdly, the web form didn't ask me for my address when I actually went to submit it. So even though they say at the beginning they need your address, when you
They
go
don't
through the
actually.
process, they don't actually. So anyway, so then I sent their rebuttal through on a Google Doc. And then
Mm-hmm.
I phoned up and
Mm.
said, I've sent it to you on a Google Doc. This is another half an hour phone call. Can you double check you've got the Google Doc and you can access it?
Mm.
This was last Friday.
Mm.
And they're like, yep, they've got the doc. Yeah, can you access it? Like they weren't answering that question. They've got the link.
Yeah.
Yes, but can you access
Eventually.
it? Right.
Right.
Anyway, the phone call ended, and then I get an email on a Saturday evening, which was bizarre. It was Saturday
Right.
about 10 to 8. It was a senior editor called Linda Lewis, I think,
Mm.
that sent through and said, we can't access your link. And I
God. Oh my God.
was like, but it's a 2,000 character box. Like, how am I supposed to deal with this? And that's when she said, can you post it? And I
Oh.
was just like, so I can email the Freedom of Information request
Yeah.
department. I can email the ICO,
Mm.
Information Commissioner's Office. I can email the journalists.
Mm-hmm.
I can't email the complaints department. It's probably for a reason. They'd be in influx.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Holy smoke. This is like some
hilarious.
Soviet era communist nonsense. Like, I mean, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, this is 10 months later. So 10 months later, I finally, they're like, right, the only way you can get us this rebuttal is if you physically print it off, put it in an envelope, and post it.
Right. So that's what you did this morning.
Mhm.
Oh my God. I mean, well, first of all, your sheer will and patience to even attempt to follow up on these numerous times. I mean, hats off to that. Because I don't think I think most people would have given up, to be honest with you. I love the way you just kept at it, and I think you're a pain in their ass, to be honest. And I think they know you now for sure, if nothing else, you know. And I think they'll be doubly conscious about printing any crap like that ever again. Well, hopefully
That's the point, isn't it?
that's the
But do you know,
point.
I am a little bit worried because I don't know if you ever saw, but about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, I was on GB News talking about CBDCs.
Right. I've seen it on your Twitter at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, and so somebody from a BBC journalist found that and then
Mm-hmm.
went through my Twitter account
Mm-hmm.
to try and find some sort of comment that I had made. And they went back to October 2022, where I'd done a really silly poll where
Mm.
I said something about who's running the world. Is it like one evil genius? Is it, I can't remember what I wrote, but it was
Yeah.
a joke.
Yeah.
And then somebody mentioned the Rothschilds, and I was just like, oh yeah, well they've got loads of money, kind of like
Yeah.
that. It was kind of like, yeah.
Yeah.
And then they took a screenshot. So this was a poll that I did in October 22.
Mm.
They went through the comments,
Mm.
and found where I had mentioned the Rothschilds in response, but it was all tongue in cheek. And
Holy shit.
they took a screenshot of it and
Mm.
posted it with my GB News clip and was calling me anti-Semitic.
Oh my God.
And you like, first of all, you had to go back a long way, and it wasn't even a post, it was a comment in a post. So you've gone through
Yeah.
every single one of my posts for the past kind of 2 years and looked at all the comments, and that's the worst thing that you could find. And then they
I'm,
use that. So part of me at the moment is now thinking, what kind of backlash is there going to be from this?
Jesus Christ. That is terrifying. I mean, holy smoke. That is really unnerving, you know? The fact that they can allocate that much time and resource just to like drudge up shit that's not even relevant and run with it anyway. I mean, what happened to like the ethics of it? And how is that legal? Is that okay to do? I mean,
I just ignored it and it went away. But, you know, it was a real eye opener for me to
yeah.
think that you can try to do the right thing and how it can get twisted, like badly.
I mean, seriously, I mean, like I said, like kudos to still being brave despite all that. I mean, like that takes
I'm
yeah,
expecting.
some
I am
serious grit.
expecting some kind of backlash, though. I don't expect that this will. You know, there'll be something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And look at, I mean, they're always going to find, if you look hard enough, you're going to find something, right? That's the thing. And then even if you
That's the
don't,
best they could find, though, and it
that's
was.
my point. That's my point. Exactly. Yeah. And like, it's just abuse of power. I mean, it's like centralization. Like, I mean, they hold all the shots. They know you, like they've got you literally by the balls and they just can do whatever the hell they want. And there is absolutely fuck all anyone can do about it,
Yeah,
you know?
I know,
It's
which is
fucking
why I can't let this go because it's
yeah.
wrong. It's an injustice.
It is. It is. I'd be amazed if so just to push back a little bit on that. So did the journalist who wrote the piece eventually
They did
take
quite
your position?
no, oh, wait, hang on. Which piece are you talking about? Which?
Sorry, I'm talking about the the guy who published it takes a gallon or swimming pool
Oh,
of water or whatever.
yeah.
Did they the journalist who wrote that piece, is he aware of the discredited source in the first place? Like has he shown any acknowledgement of that fact?
He will not acknowledge my emails at all. The
Right.
only reason I know that he received my emails is because I also sent it to their crypto correspondent,
Mm,
who was really helpful and confirmed that he had sent it to him.
mm.
Otherwise, I would have no knowledge of him receiving it at all.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Because I was thinking, I mean, yeah, like, I mean, because that's surely something, that's a question of like basic journalistic integrity, you'd imagine. I mean, if I was like, even if I was to publish something that I know has since been proven to be wrong, or the guy who said something to me was wrong, I would then have to publish something to that effect,
I
right?
make corrections. I've made 2 or 3 corrections on that. I've done about 100 Forbes articles in the past
Yeah.
year, and I've made 2 or 3 corrections.
Yeah.
And I make it really clear. And they're not even big ones. It's just a couple of words that need to be adjusted so that the meaning is a little bit clearer. You know,
Mm,
it's minor that
mm.
most people wouldn't pick up on. But I'll make a correction straight away because I want to make sure everything I write is correct.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Jeez. Wow. Okay. That is a hell of a story. And like, genuinely, like I said, hats off to your.
Which
Say it
is
again?
like, what's going to happen? And the thing is, all I want is a retraction. That's all I want.
Mm, mm. Oh, maybe you'll get it. Maybe.
Do you think? What do you think? What do you think's going to happen?
I'd like to believe that somebody in there in the chain of events is going to see some basic reason, right? They're going to have to. I mean, end of the day, look, I mean, however twisted anyone might be, there, I still believe in like just basic common sense. I think that will prevail, and I think that's how this is likely going to happen. They'll have to chew. I mean, they'll have to eat a lot of humble pie in the process. But so be it. I mean, that's if you made a mistake, you got to fess up, right?
But would it? Do you think they'd be concerned about it opening floodgates?
Um, Potentially,
So do you
yeah.
think that could be why they're not doing it?
they don't want to publicly backtrack. Nobody wants to publicly backtrack necessarily, right? Like I think it's that. And also like, yeah, I mean, okay, if they were wrong about this, what else have they been wrong about? What's stopping a million other Susies from sending in letters?
Time.
Yeah. Yeah, willpower mainly. But look, good luck with all of that stuff. I mean, genuinely, and keep us all updated. I mean, like it's I know it might seem to us as pure entertainment, but genuinely
Is
what
that
you're
how it's
doing.
coming across? Is it? Because if it is,
No, not really. It's a bit tongue in cheek.
with that. I'm happy with that because I don't want it to be boring. And I don't know if you've noticed, is every time there's a new edition, I quote the last tweet.
Yeah,
So you can go through and
chronologically. Yeah. It's all there.
everything that's happened.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think no, like I said, it's inspirational, genuinely is what it is, right? I mean, I think it's inspirational and you've done it in a very tongue-in-cheek way, at least publicly on Twitter. I think you've been very candid about it, which I think is awesome.
I
So
wasn't going to put it on Twitter.
yeah.
That was an act of desperation.
Yeah.
Not, because I've only really been tweeting about it for the past couple of months, or month.
Yeah.
Actually, prior
Yeah.
to that, I was doing this all behind the scenes and
Yeah.
quietly. I would have just been happy for them to give a retraction and for no one to have known any of the stuff that I'd done.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, you got to do what you got to do, right? Right. Awesome. I know we're nearly at the end of the hour, or we're just past it, but let me throw a few questions at you really quickly as part of the rapid fire before we finish up, right? All good? So,
Yeah, absolutely.
question one. There's only 5 of them. Don't worry. They're not going to put you on the spot. Describe Bitcoin in one word.
Freedom.
If Bitcoin was a sound, what would it be?
Bells.
Okay.
This is
How
it.
would you?
I know, but I need to think about it. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Sorry, don't worry. It's just off the cuff stuff. How will you be, or how or when will you be convinced, like in the heart of hearts, that Bitcoin has truly arrived?
Never,
Mm,
because it's a process
mm.
and an evolution, and I
I-
don't know what that looks like, and I don't think anybody knows what that looks like.
Interesting. Yeah, agree. Actually, yeah. Will there ever be harder money?
Never say never. I mean, we can always improve. I there's definitely a lot of things about Bitcoin that aren't perfect.
Mm. So you think we could somebody could come up with something even more perfect than?
Maybe, but it has to have the network effect, and everybody has to be on board. So I
Mm.
think it's unlikely. It's just not impossible.
Yeah, fair enough. And the last question, $1 trillion question: who do you think Satoshi was or is?
Um, I thought it could be Hal Finney or
Hmm.
Nick Sasbo.
Yeah, my money was on Hal Finney, but if you look at some of the older emails where Hal Finney talks to Satoshi and then Satoshi replies, it's kind of like, Jesus. I mean, that's like either a really, really well acted sort of split personality thing that he's done, or I mean,
Do you know why I think it could be Hal?
yeah,
It's because as somebody who's developed finance systems, whenever
hmm
you do a test on something, you always use yourself as a test. Always.
yeah, okay,
So when the Genesis block, when the first test was done,
hmm
so it was Satoshi with Hal.
yeah. But Hal was also the chief contributor to most of the code, was he not?
Yes, but I still think that as an engineer, you would send yourself the first
Hmm.
one.
Was Hal Finney American or British?
American.
American. Because there's this whole theory about how Satoshi spells a few things. That he spells it the British way and not the American way, but that could just be a double bluff as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
and you had to be American as well because nobody else would overuse the word nonce.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. Look, I mean, look, whatever it is, I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of it. And in a way, I actually love it.
Do we want to know?
No, I don't. I really don't. I really don't. I think that could be the worst thing that happens actually if Satoshi was public. So look at Susie, I know it's been a hell of a Monday afternoon for me. This has been a great conversation. Hopefully you've had a nice time as well, I hope.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely, my pleasure. Good luck with everything. Thank you so much for all your insight. We'll be following the saga closely. And look, I'm sure we'll bring you back for a few more conversations about everything else that's happening. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you. See you
Take
later.
it easy. Bye.
Bye.
Right. Cool.